Our party quickly made its way to his cave, but we failed to find our host himself inside. He was off in his pasture, ranging his sleek flocks. So we explored his den, gazing wide-eyed at it all. The large flat racks loaded with drying cheeses, the folds crowded with young lambs and kids, split into 3 groups, here the spring-born, here mid-yearlings, here the fresh sucklings. Off to the side, each sort was penned apart. In all his vessels, pails and hammered buckets he used for milking were brimming full with whey. From the start, my comrades pressed me, pleading hard. Let's make away with the cheeses, then come back. Hurry, drive the lambs and kids from the pens to our swift ship, put out to sea at once. But I would not give way, and how much better it would have been, not till I saw him, saw what gifts he'd give. But he proved no lovely sight to my companions. There we built a fire, set our hands on the cheeses, offered some to the gods and ate the bulk ourselves, and settled down inside, awaiting his return. And back he came from pasture, late in the day, herding his flocks home and lugging a huge load of good dry logs to fuel his fire at supper. He flung them down in the cave, a jolting crash. We scuttled in panic into the deepest dark recess. And next he drove his sleek flocks into the open vault. All he'd milk at least, but he left the males outside, rams and billy goats out in the high walled yard. Then to close his door, he hoisted overhead a tremendous, massive slab. No 22 wagons, rugged and four-wheeled, could budge that boulder off the ground, I tell you. Such an immense stone the monster wedged to block his cave. Then down he squatted to milk his sheep and bleating goats, each in order, and put a suckling underneath each dam. And half of the fresh white milk he curdled quickly, set it aside in wicker racks to press for cheese. The other half let stand in pails and buckets, ready at hand to wash his supper down. As soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores, he lit his fire and spied us in the blaze, and "Strangers!" he thundered out. "Now who are you? Where did you sail from? Over the running sea lanes? Out on a trading spree, or roving the waves like pirates? Sea wolves, raiding at will, who risk their lives to plunder other men?" The hearts inside us shook, terrified by his rumbling voice and monstrous hulk. Nevertheless, I found the nerve to answer firmly. "Men of Achaea we are, and bound now from Troy, driven far off course by the warring winds over the vast gulf of the sea, battling home on a strange tack, a route that's off the map, and so we've come to you. So it must please King Zeus's plotting heart. We're glad to say we're men of Atrides Agamemnon, whose fame is the proudest thing on earth these days. So great a city he sacked, such multitudes he killed. But since we've chanced on you, we're at your knees in hopes of a warm welcome, even a guest gift. The sort that hosts give strangers, that's the custom. Respect the gods, my friend. We're suppliants at your mercy. Zeus of the strangers guards all guests and suppliants. Strangers are sacred. Zeus will avenge their rights." "Stranger," he grumbled back from his brutal heart. "You must be a fool, stranger, or come from nowhere telling me to fear the gods or avoid their wrath. We Cyclops never blink at Zeus and Zeus's shield of storm and thunder, or any other blessed god. We've got more force by far. I'd never spare you in fear of Zeus's hatred. You or your comrades here, unless I had the urge. But tell me, where did you moor your sturdy ship when you arrived? Up the coast or close in? I'd just like to know." So he laid his trap, but he never caught me, no. Wise to the world, I shot back in my crafty way. "My ship? Poseidon, god of the earthquake, smashed my ship. He drove it against the rocks at your island's far cape. He dashed it against a cliff as the winds rode us in. I and the men you see escaped a sudden death." Not a word in reply to that, the ruthless brute. Lurching up, he lunged out with his hands towards my men, and snatching two at once, wrapping them on the ground, he knocked them dead like pups. Their brains gushed out all over, soaked the floor, and ripping them limb from limb to fix his meal, he bolted them down like a mountain lion, left no scrap. Devoured entrails, flesh and bones, marrow and all. We flung our arms to Zeus. We wept and cried aloud, looking on at his grisly work, paralyzed, appalled. But once the Cyclops had stuffed his enormous gut with human flesh, washing it down with raw milk, he slept in his cave, stretched out along his flocks. And I, with my fighting heart, I thought at first to steal up to him, draw the sharp sword at my hip, and stab his chest where the midriff packs the liver. I groped for the fatal spot, but a fresh thought held me back. There at a stroke we'd finish off ourselves as well. How could we, with our bare hands, heave back that slab he set to block his cavern's gaping maw? So we lay there groaning, waiting dawn's first light. When young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, the monster relit his fire and milked his handsome ewes, each in order, putting a suckling underneath each dam. And as soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores, he snatched up two more men and fixed his meal. Well fed, he drove his fat sheep from the cave, lightly lifting the huge door slab up and away, then slipped it back in place, as a hunter flips the lid of his quiver shut. Piercing whistles, turning his flocks to the hills, he left me there, the heart inside me brooding on revenge. How could I pay him back? Would Athena give me glory? Here was the plan that struck my mind as best. The Cyclops' great club. There it lay by the pens, olive wood full of sap. He'd lopped it off to brandish once it dried. Looking it over, we judged it big enough to be the mast of a pitch-black ship with her 20 oars. A freighter broad in the beam that plows through miles of sea. So long, so thick, it bulked before our eyes. Well, flanking it now, I chopped off a fathom's length, rolled it to comrades, told them to plane it down, and they made the club smooth as I bent and shaved the tip to a stabbing point. I turned it over the blazing fire to char it good and hard, then hid it well, buried deep under the dung that littered the cavern's floor in thick, wet clumps. And now I ordered my shipmates all to cast lots, who'd brave it out with me, to hoist our stake and grind it into his eye when sleep had overcome him. Luck of the draw. I got the very first ones I would have picked myself. 4 good men, and I in the lead made 5. Nightfall brought him back, herding his woolly sheep, and he quickly drove the sleek flock into the vaulted cavern. Rams and all, none left outside in the walled yard. His own idea, perhaps, or a god led him on. Then he hoisted the huge slab to block the door and squatted to milk his sheep and bleating goats, each in order, putting a suckling underneath each dam. And as soon as he'd briskly finished all his chores, he snatched up 2 more men and fixed his meal. But this time I lifted a carved wooden bowl, brimful of my ruddy wine, and went right up to the Cyclops enticing. Here, Cyclops, try this wine, to top off the banquet of human flesh you've bolted down. Judge for yourself what stock our ship had stored. I brought it here to make you a fine libation, hoping you would pity me, Cyclops, send me home. But your rages are insufferable. You barbarian, how can any man on earth come visit you after this? What you've done outrages all that's right. At that, he seized the bowl and tossed it off, and the heady wine pleased him immensely. More, he demanded a second bowl, a hearty helping, and tell me your name now, quickly, so I can hand my guest a gift to warm his heart. Our soil yields the Cyclops powerful, full-bodied wine, and the rains from Zeus build its strength, but this is nectar, ambrosia, this flows from heaven. At that, he seized the bowl and tossed it off. So he declared. I poured him another fiery bowl, 3 bowls I brimmed, and 3 he drank to the last drop, the fool. And then, when the wine was swirling round his brain, I approached my host with a cordial winning word. So, you asked me the name I'm known by, Cyclops? I will tell you, but you must give me a guest gift, as you've promised. Nobody, that's my name, Nobody. So my mother and father call me, all my friends. But he boomed back at me from his ruthless heart. Nobody? I'll eat nobody last of all his friends. I'll eat the others first. That's my gift to you. With that, he toppled over, sprawled full length, flat on his back, and lay there, his massive neck slumping to one side, and sleep that conquers all overwhelmed him now as wine came spurting, flooding up from his gullet with chunks of human flesh. He vomited, blind drunk. Now at last, I thrust our steak in a bed of embers to get it red hot and rallied all my comrades. Courage! No panic! No one hang back now! And green as it was, just as the olive steak was about to catch fire, the glow terrific. Yes, I dragged it from the flames, my men clustering round as some god breathed enormous courage through us all. Hoisting high that olive steak with its stabbing point, straight into the monster's eye they rammed it hard. I drove my weight on it from above and bore it home as a shipwright bores his beam with the shipwright's drill. That men below, whipping the strap back and forth, whirl and the drill keeps twisting faster, never stopping. So we seized our stake with its fiery tip and bored it round and round in the giant's eye till blood came boiling up around that smoking shaft, and the hot blast singed his brow and eyelids round the core, and the broiling eyeball burst. Its crackling roots blazed and hissed as a blacksmith plunges a glowing axe or adze in an ice-cold bath, and the metal screeches, steam and its temper hardens. That's the iron's strength. So the eye of the Cyclops sizzled around that stake. He loosed a hideous roar. The rock walls echoed round, and we scuttled back in terror. The monster wrenched the spike from his eye, and out it came with a red geyser of blood. He flung it aside with frantic hands, and mad with pain, he bellowed out for help from his neighbor Cyclops, living round about in caves on wind-swept crags. Hearing his cries, they lumbered up from every side, and hulking round his cavern, asked what ailed him. What, Polyphemus? What in the world's the trouble? Roaring out in the god-sent night to rob us of our sleep. Surely no one's rustling your flocks against your will? Surely no one's trying to kill you now by fraud or force? Nobody, friends, Polyphemus bellowed back from his cave. Nobody's killing me now by fraud and not by force. If you're alone, his friends boomed back at once, and nobody's trying to overpower you now, look, it must be a plague sent here by mighty Zeus, and there's no escape from that. You better pray to your father, Lord Poseidon. They lumbered off, but laughter filled my heart to think how nobody's name, my great cunning stroke, had duped them one and all. But the Cyclops there, still groaning, racked with agony, groped around for the huge slab, and heaving it from the doorway, down he sat in the cave's mouth, his arms spread wide, hoping to catch a comrade stealing out with sheep. Such a blithering fool he took me for. But I was already plotting. What was the best way out? How could I find escape from death for my crew, myself as well? My wits kept weaving cunning schemes, life at stake, monstrous death staring us in the face, till this plan struck my mind as best. That flock, those well-fed rams with their splendid thick fleece, sturdy, handsome beasts sporting their dark weight of wool. I lashed them abreast, quietly, twisting the willow twigs. The Cyclops slept on, giant, lawless brute. I took them 3 by 3, each ram in the middle bore a man, while the 2 rams either side would shield him well. So 3 beasts to bear each man. But as for myself, there was one bellwether ram, the prize of all the flock, and clutching him by his back, tucked up under his shaggy belly, there I hung, face upward, both hands locked in his marvelous deep fleece. Clinging for dear life, my spirit steeled, enduring. So we held on, desperate, waiting dawn's first light. As soon as young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, the rams went rumbling out of the cave toward pasture. The ewes kept bleating round the pens, unmilked, their udders about to burst. Their master now, heaving in torment, felt the back of each animal halting before him here, but the idiot never sensed my men were trussed up under their thick fleecy ribs. And last of them all came my great ram now, striding out, weighed down with his dense wool and my deep plots. Stroking him gently, powerful Polyphemus murmured, "Dear old ram, why the last of the flock to quit the cave? In the good old days you'd never lag behind the rest. You with your long marching strides, first by far of the flock to graze the fresh young grasses, first by far to reach the rippling streams, first to turn back home, keen for your fold when night comes on, but now you're last of all? And why? Sick at heart for your master's eye? That coward gouged out with his wicked crew, only after he'd stunned my wits with wine. Well, that nobody who's not escaped his death, I swear, not yet. Oh, if only you thought like me, had words like me, to tell me where that scoundrel is cringing from my rage. I'd smash him against the ground. I'd spill his brains. Flooding across my cave, and that would ease my heart of the pains that good for nothing nobody made me suffer. And with that threat, he let my ram go free outside. But soon as we'd got 1 foot past cave and courtyard, first I loosed myself from the ram, then loosed my men, then quickly, glancing back again and again, we drove our flock, good plump beasts with their long shanks, straight to the ship, and a welcome sight we were to loyal comrades, we who'd escaped our deaths. But for all the rest they broke down and wailed. I cut it short. I stopped each shipmate's cries, my head tossing, brows frowning, silent signals to hurry, tumble our fleecy herd on board, launch out on the open sea. They swung aboard, they sat to the oars in ranks, and in rhythm churned the water white with stroke on stroke. But once offshore, as far as a man's shout can carry, I called back to the Cyclops, stinging taunts. So, Cyclops, no weak coward it was whose crew you bent to devour there in your vaulted cave. You with your brute force, your filthy crimes came down on your own head, you shameless cannibal, daring to eat your guests in your own house, so Zeus and the other gods have paid you back. That made the rage of the monster boil over. Ripping off the peak of a towering crag, he heaved it so hard the boulder landed just in front of our dark prow, and a huge swell reared up as the rock went plunging under, a tidal wave from the open sea. The sudden backwash drove us landward again, forcing us close inshore, but grabbing a long pole, I thrust us off and away, tossing my head for dear life, signaling crews to put their backs in the oars, escape grim death. They threw themselves in the labor, rowed on fast, but once we plowed the breakers twice as far, again I began to taunt the Cyclops. Men around me trying to check me, call me, left and right. So headstrong, why? Why rile the beast again? That rock he flung in the sea just now, hurling our ship to shore once more. We thought we'd die on the spot. If he'd had caught a sound from one of us, just a moan, he would have crushed our heads and ship timbers with one heave of another flashing, jagged rock. Good God, the brute can throw! So they begged. They could not bring my fighting spirit round. I called back with another burst of anger. Cyclops! If any man on the face of the earth should ask you, who blinded you, shamed you so, say, Odysseus! Raider of cities, he gouged out your eye. Laertes his son, who makes his home in Ithaca. So I vaunted, and he groaned back in answer, Oh, no, that prophecy years ago. It all comes home to me with a vengeance now. We once had a prophet here, a great tall man, Telemus, Euremus' son, a master at reading signs, who grew old in his trade among his fellow Cyclops. All this, he warned me, would come to pass someday, that I'd be blinded here at the hands of one Odysseus. But I always looked for a handsome giant man to cross my path, some fighter clad in power like armor plate. But now,
Look what a dwarf, a spineless good-for-nothing, stuns me with wine, then gouges out my eye. Come here, Odysseus. Let me give you a guest gift and urge Poseidon, the earthquake god, to speed you home. I am his son, and he claims to be my father true, and he himself will heal me if he pleases. No other blessed god, no man can do the work. Heal you? Here was my parting shot. Would to God I could strip you of life and breath and ship you down to the house of death, as surely as no one will ever heal your eye, not even your earthquake god himself. But at that he bellowed out to Lord Poseidon, thrusting his arms to the starry skies, and prayed, "Hear me, Poseidon, god of the sea blue mane who rocks the earth. If I really am your son, and you claim to be my father, grant that Odysseus, raider of cities, Laertes' son who makes his home in Ithaca, never reaches home. Or if he's fated to see his people once again and reach his well-built house and his own native country, let him come home late and come a broken man, all shipmates lost, alone in a stranger's ship, and let him find a world of pain at home." So he prayed, and the god of the sea blue mane, Poseidon, heard his prayer. The monster suddenly hoisted a boulder, far larger, wheeled it and heaved it, putting his weight behind it. Massive strength, and the boulder crashed close, landing just in the wake of our dark stern, just failing to graze the rudder's bladed edge. A huge swell reared up as the rock went plunging under. Yes, and the tidal breaker drove us out to our island's far shore, where all my well-decked ships laid moored. Clustered, waiting, and huddled round them, crewmen sat in anguish, waiting, chafing for our return. We beached our vessel hard ashore on the sand. We swung out in the frothing surf ourselves, and herding Cyclops' sheep from our deep holds, we shared them round so no one, not on my account, would go deprived of his fair share of spoils. But the splendid ram, as we meted out the flocks my friends in arms made him my prize of honor, mine alone, and I slaughtered him on the beach and burnt his thighs to Cronus' mighty son, Zeus of the thundercloud, who rules the world. But my sacrifices failed to move the god. Zeus was still obsessed with plans to destroy my entire oar-swept fleet and loyal crew of comrades. Now all day long till the sun went down we sat and feasted on sides of meat and heady wine. Then when the sun had set and the night came on, we lay down and slept at the water's shelving edge. When young dawn with her rose-red fingers shone once more, I roused the men straight away, ordering all crews to man the ships and cast off cables quickly. They swung aboard at once. They sat to the oars in ranks and in rhythm churned the water white with stroke on stroke. And from there we sailed on, glad to escape our death, yet sick at heart for the comrades we had lost.